All right, so welcome to this very special video edition of Backstage. I'm going to be editing the episode that comes out in conjunction with this. It's very meta, I know. Forgive me in advance, I got a little bit of a sore throat, so I've got a drink here. I may need to stop a couple of times. Anyways, so in this folder, I have the building blocks for our episode. I've got my empty logic project, my template, and then I have Mike and I's files. We use Skype to hear each other, so we have a backup with call recorder, but I want to edit together our local files. So we're going to do that. So I'm going to open these in Audition. And like we say in the episode, this is just the way that I do it. There's lots of different ways to do this, but I thought it'd be helpful to show my philosophy and Mike's philosophy. So here in Audition, I can just check things.
For a bunch about a thing, and then we will talk about it together. So I'm kind of like getting my knowledge out. So what you're hearing here is so once we're done,
so we can make sure that everything's here in this, and in any. I'm going to normalize both of them, which brings the quiet parts up. You see, this is a really loud part. Let's see what this is. Probably a laugh.
I have to tell him.
Yeah, so I'm going to bring that volume down a touch. And then normalize again. There we go. Normalize mine. They're already both mono. So I'm going to go in here. And we talked about this in the episode about volume matching. These are the settings that we use. So we've got our target loudness, tolerance, max peak, etc. You can see all that there. So what this is going to do is it's going to give me two new files, each volume matched to that level. And that means that we will be the same perceived loudness, which is good. And I am fiddling with my audio levels when I record this. So I'm trying to do all this in one pass and using my streaming rig to do it. Okay, so now you can see I have a bunch of files here. What I'm looking for is this and this. These PKF files are created by Audition. I don't need those. So I'm going to open my Logic project. First time I've opened Logic on this laptop since they had an update, so I guess I get to do this. So we get to watch it scan all these audio units. Anytime you update Logic, you run into this. And it's really annoying. Oh, I'm not going to send it for Isotope right now. Isotope RX7 is an application for really nerdy sound stuff. It can work wonders with background noise and things. I don't use it very often, and clearly I haven't even set it up on this laptop yet, so I apologize for this being in here. But we're just doing it live, so this is just part of editing. Sometimes you got to contend with software. All right, I want to just go check my inputs and outputs real quick. Output device is my 4K capture card. Input device can be the microphone, that's fine. Okay, so you see in this Logic project a couple of things. So I have a track for each of us, for myself and Mike, and then we have a joke that if someone talks about podcast networks, we play the siren sound. Not gonna need that this time, so I can go ahead and mute that. And then I have a, turn these on. I have a compressor for both Mike and I. I use basically the standard compressor in Logic. There's a few tweaks in here. Getting into the details of this is really beyond what this episode talks about, but we will talk about what compressors do in a little while. So I'm going to bring my files in. So I have mic matched wave, and I have my matched wave file. We'll let Logic chew on those. And then just to make everything bigger, I'm going to hide the I/O panel down there, just so we can see this a little bit bigger. Go ahead and save again. And these should be pretty close to being lined up because Mike and I count in. Do we do 3, 2, 1, click? So hopefully this is pretty close. We'll find out soon.
I saw the places where you put my... Welcome back.
Yeah, so this was just talk beforehand. So this is Mike's first statement. And cut both tracks at once if I want to.
Welcome back to Backstage, where we talk about what's going on behind the scenes here at Relay FM and share our knowledge with you to
Ooh, let me turn that down a little bit for you.
help you start your own podcast. My name is Mike Hurley, and I am joined by Relay FM co-founder, Mr. Stephen Hackett.
Hello, Relay FM co-founder Mike Hurley.
Hello.
Okay, so it sounds like we were a little bit off. I'll probably adjust this as we go, because I'm going to do a full listen to this.
Hackett.
Hello, Relay FM co-founder Mike Hurley.
Hello.
How
What's
are
going
you?
on at Relay?
Okay, so I have the rough lining up that I want, and I'm going to do a couple of things. So if you have really good control over background noise and everything, you can use strip silence, which basically goes in and you have this new window, and you give it a bunch of parameters. These are the ones that I use. So it's putting the threshold at minus 28 decibels, so anything below that, just get rid of. It needs to be 1.2 seconds long to be accepted as silence. And then we have our pre and post time, which is basically how fast it ramps up and ramps down. And I'm gonna go ahead and run that on Mike's track. I'll run it on my track. I can do this because Mike and I have basically no background noise because we have really set up nice recording spaces. If you do have background noise, I would not recommend using strip silence because you can really run into trouble. The other thing that we do here is if we do chapters, we can insert those markers, but Backstage does not have chapters, so we don't have to worry about that today. So let's start listening.
Welcome back to Backstage, where we talk about what's going on behind the scenes here at Relay FM and share our knowledge with you to help you start your own podcast. My name is Mike Hurley, and I am joined by Relay FM co-founder, Mr. Stephen Hackett.
Hello, Relay FM co-founder Mike Hurley.
Hello.
So I'm just going to tighten that up. This was crosstalk. We heard that earlier, so I can go ahead and bring this forward a little bit. So just in Logic, to select everything to the right, it's Shift F, and that way I can move everything up together, and I keep the relationship between the clips the same.
Hello. What's going on at Relay FM? I'm good, but what's happening here? Can you tell me? I've been away for a while.
We invented a 6-year battle. So I'm going to get rid of those false starts.
Fill me in.
We invented a 6-year battle.
Yep.
Is what we've done.
Mm-hmm.
So when we finally decided on the name of the company, which we've told that story before, it was hellacious. We got to get a Twitter handle. And it turned out at Relay FM had already been taken, but to make matters worse, the account was suspended. So one thing you can do in Logic is you can have the playhead and the scrolling move together. So it's called scroll and play. Mm-hmm. Couldn't use it. And we tried...
Unused.
Oh, I'm going to move that so we can hear it.
Used.
Tried contacting Twitter. And basically as it plays... the Logic project was scroll. I don't like that, so I leave that turned off. Once we had our trademark, tried contacting Twitter again, nothing happened. I tried a few times over the years, go through the process, but then you used your social media influencer status and got us the handle.
No, we spoke about...
Oh, so move that back. So we may be a little out of time, so there may be some adjustment to do as we go. Got us the handle.
No, we spoke about it here.
Here?
Yeah, we spoke about it on Backstage.
I think you spoke about it on Cortex. Was it here?
We were just talking about...
Okay, so I think Mike is a little ahead of me. So I can do Option Shift. Oh, that's not it. Control Shift F. Control Shift F, and I can grab everything on his track. I'm just going to bump that back a hair. Is it here?
We were just talking about branding on the we were just talking about branding on the line.
All right, so we're going to move that up.
Is it here? We were just talking about branding.
Okay, so you can see I'm using, in the drag mode, I'm using crossfade. Strip silence can lead to this sometimes because of those values we put in, so you may end up with strip silence crossfading. But I like this because it is a little bit more natural sounding.
On the last episode, right?
Oh, it was here. I thought it was on Cortez.
Yeah, and I told the story here. And then a unnamed but heroic Relay FM member reached out to me, and they work at a company that sells birds, and they got it all sorted out for us. So we are now the proud owners of @Relay FM. Woo! Finally.
Move my celebration back.
Finally.
Woo! So you can see here this line, I got a little bit of mouth noise. Woo! Get rid of that. Woo!
So no more underscore. Which is what I said in the Slack, and immediately felt bad about it. Tried to change it, and underscore still felt like we kicked him out.
Yep. Sorry, Dave.
Sorry, Dave. We have ended the tyranny of the underscore.
That's right.
Finally.
Mm-hmm. All right, so some of these trailing comments I'm going to get rid of. Move this forward.
Finally. We are going to talk about editing this time.
Got a ways to go.
We got a lot of questions from members in the Relay FM members Discord, which you should be a part of if you're not already. You can check previous email communications from
Join the Discord. It's really easy to do. If you go to relay.fm/membership, there's a link in the sidebar.
us if you want a link to sign up. Some of these questions are technical, some are theoretical, and that is like the whole thing about editing. Some of the questions are kind of, what are your thoughts on this? And some of the questions are, how exactly do you do this? And the questions we have are a real mix of those things today.
Mm-hmm. And so thinking about how to... I'm going to get rid of my little there.
Today.
And so thinking about... So you can see I'm not really making the conversation different. I'm not making it unnatural by getting rid of every little and ah. My plan is really just to tidy it up. About how to do this, because it is hard to talk about. In the show notes will be a link to... I'm just going to tighten up that pause. A video, which is me editing... Hey, it's this video. This very podcast you're listening to. And me walking through the process that we're going to talk about some today, but some of it is just, it's just so hard to talk about. So that video will be obviously longer than the podcast episode, but if you want to listen to that way, along with my commentary on things that I'm doing, that may be a fun way to do this. So I'm going to bring Mike's reply up a little bit.
Yeah, it's a specific set of tools and stuff being... it's a specific... it's a specific...
I get rid of the first part of his stammering. To do this.
It's a specific set of tools and stuff being used, but the basics of how Stephen edits will be of use to you. I will just say... Just one of the other things is everybody edits differently.
Yes. It's definitely right. Not every show needs to be done quite like this. Not everyone uses Audition. You can use other tools. Even Logic has some volume matching stuff. I just think Audition does a better job.
So kind of from today, from what we're going to talk about, and from when you watch that video, take what we say as guidelines, not rules. About what you should use and how you should do it.
Right.
Because,
I'm going to move my right back so I say it when he's getting quiet.
You should do it because
right.
Even between the two of us, I'm sure we're going to get into it today, there are some things that we fundamentally disagree on when it comes to how podcasts are edited. I do have like a little opening diatribe that I would like to give before we get into the questions.
Diatribe sounds scary. Are we in trouble?
Okay, so
Okay, so here we got some crosstalks. Let's deal with this.
Diatribe that I would like to
Ooh.
give.
Ooh.
Before we get into the questions.
Diatribe sounds scary. Get rid of his I'm going to bring my comments together and then move his back. So crosstalk you can fix in a bunch of ways. You can get rid of one person's side of the conversation and just pretend that the interjection never happened. I like this interjection, so I'm going to play it as if I interrupted him. Ooh.
Before we get into the questions.
Diatribe sounds scary. Are we in trouble?
Yeah.
And I'm going to get rid of that. Bring this forward a touch.
The questions.
Diatribe sounds scary. Are we in trouble?
Yeah. Okay, so like here's the thing about this. I have a
Okay, so here he...
Yeah. Okay, so like...
So that's a false start.
Here's the thing about this. I have...
It's going to try to make him sound more certain as he starts his sentence. Scary. Are we in trouble?
Here's the thing about this. I have a
See how much better that sounds without the, yeah, well, you know, like... In trouble?
Here's the thing about this. I have a podcast mentorship group that I've been running for the last 7 months or so, where I have a group of 8 or 9 people, and they're trying to get their podcasts off the ground. And this is a thing that I started doing 7 or 8 months ago. And our last, and they're trying to get 7 months or so, where
Okay, so he mentions how long the mentorship has been going on, so we don't need to hear that twice.
They're trying to get their podcasts off the ground, and this is a thing that I started doing 7 or 8 months ago. And our last month's call.
Okay. So we already heard how long it takes, and since he stumbled through the amount of time the second time he said it, I think that's going to sound nicer.
They're trying to get their podcasts off the ground, and this is a thing that I started doing. And our last month's call
Having fun yet?
was about podcast editing. It's interesting to me. Backstage has both helped me.
See, in times like this, if we wanted to speed this up, we could skip this. Nothing in here looks like an or an ah to me, or like a big pause, so we can skip to the end if we want to.
Together for my mentorship call. So, will you allow me a minute or two?
Yes, please. All right, so this I'm just going to center up a little bit. Sometimes with crosstalk, and I think I mentioned this in this episode, you can't really resolve it because the person who is being interrupted stops speaking, in which case you kind of just have to leave it. But in this case, when you have 2 people who both edit podcasts on a show, we just talk sentences over each other. I don't trust that I'll fix it in post.
A minute or two?
Yes, please.
All right, so editing a podcast is a subjective thing. There are basics that can be taught. You can be taught the keyboard shortcuts. You can be taught how to use different tools and different software editors and stuff like that. You could watch
This right here looks like it could be an or an ah right there. So we're going to see how that goes.
YouTube videos. You can watch through the video Steven's going to make. But the way that you end up editing a podcast and the amount that you edit it comes to personal taste. I also feel like there is an art in podcast editing.
See?
May make some people roll their eyes, but I'm going to use this analogy anyway because I like to do it. I almost feel it's kind of a little bit like sculpture. So you have a amount of material and you take material away from it until you're left with the end result. That's kind of how I think about editing a podcast. While this can be time consuming, I do recommend listening back to your show.
Hey, that's what we're doing.
About editing a podcast.
You also notice that I'm saving in Logic just all the time.
While this can be about editing a podcast.
Okay, so we have a little bit of breath sound there. So I need to actually crossfade these a little bit.
Editing a podcast. While this can be time consuming, I do recommend listening back to your show while you edit it. It will allow you to find ways that you can improve the show itself, what works and what doesn't, especially if you're new. Like I recommend that to people when they're starting out, right? Even if you don't intend to really heavily edit, you should just listen back to it while you're editing it anyway to begin with, so you can kind of get to grips with it. One thing that people think that you need to do is remove every or breath. Do not. You can kind of get to grips with it. One thing that people think that you.
So this is an important point right here.
You need to do is remove every or breath. Do not do this. This is a bad idea. Do not do it. Take out ones that aren't needed. You can take out ones that are, if someone's doing it a bunch, maybe there's some filler words and stuff. But these kinds of noises are natural in speech, and if you remove them all, you're left with something that sounds quite unnatural. As well, a lot of the time, people kind of bridge a word into an or an and you can't remove it. So do not be so aggressive about it. Like, they're allowed to be in there. People aren't going to...
So like is a really common filler word that Mike uses?
Aggressive about it. Like...
Right there. See it?
Aggressive about it. Like...
Get rid of it. That one really bothers me. Not just Mike, but in general when I listen to shows, the word like is one that I try to remove.
About it. They're allowed to be in there. People aren't going to go wild. But for example, if I do that, Stephen could have removed that. He's not going... For example, if I do that, Stephen could have removed that. He's not going to remove it because it won't make my point in the edit. But
the power is mine.
They're the kinds of ones that you can take out quite easily. But if I took like that, he can't take that out without it sounding weird. Don't worry about it. It's fine. You do not need to remove them all. Do not use AI tools that try and remove all of these things because it will sound unnatural.
Yeah, I agree with you. I generally take out the ones that are really bad, or someone's searching for the next word and they're like, I'll take that out almost every time. So like right there, see, I got well, I was thinking about what to say next. It is natural. You've got to find the balance. I've got one person that that's a mouth noise. Get rid of that. The easiest way to get rid of mouth noise is to be super hydrated when you record, and drinking water as you record when you're not speaking. Got to find the balance. If you trust whoever's editing, or if you're editing, to remove that sound later, because no one wants to hear that. Balance. I've got one person that I edit who will remain nameless, who makes a very loud breathing in noise. It's Quinn Nelson. And I take out what I can because it's gross, but sometimes they stay in because you can't fix it. You just got to find the right...
Can you give me an example?
Okay, so right there, Mike starts talking and I just end, so I'm going to get rid of my fake sentence if I can. Can't fix it. You just got to find the right...
Can you give me an example of what this...
All right. You can't fix it.
Can you give me...
Ooh, it doesn't sound very good. Can't fix it.
Can you give me...
So I'm still going to have him cut me off to hide that little noise, but at least it's at the end of a sentence and not the middle of a sentence. Fix it.
Can you give me an example of what this sounds like?
Let's see if I can do it. So there...
Okay. What this sounds like?
Let's see if I can do it. So there...
Okay.
So Mike, let's talk about editing. Quinn's aren't that bad. I exaggerated, but they're in there.
Interesting. Okay.
And I get rid of as many as I can. They leave a little break on either side of it. When you hit the delete key, make sure you don't have a bunch of stuff highlighted. To clip out, but it's time consuming.
I edit in one of three with different ways. And I have all of these as options that I use every week. One of these is a note-taking edit. This is... do not start with this because this requires practice. It's my favorite way to edit because it is the most effective for the time that you put into it. But you need to be able to multitask while doing it. So while I'm recording a show... my primary example of this is Upgrade, which I host with Jason Snell. While me and Jason are recording, if we talk over...
This right here coming up. Looks like
over each other egregiously, if we have
it's an
to
F.
restate something, if some edit needs to be made of some kind, maybe somebody says something
Get rid of this mouth noise that I see in advance.
wrong. I am writing all these notes down with time codes, and I've kind of developed my own shorthand. So once we're done editing, I put these files into my editor and I go through each time code and clean things up. There are a lot of like really weird things that you need to do to make this right, like editing in reverse.
Okay, so what Mike is getting ready to talk about, if you have timestamps, so think about a linear line, 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minutes. If you fix something at 1 minute, say you remove 10 seconds and you move everything to meet it, then your old 2-minute mark is now at 150 and your old 3-minute mark is now at 250. And over the course of an hour, that compounds where you can't keep track of it. So what I've been doing, where I make a cut and then I bring everything forward, that doesn't work with timestamps. So what Mike's getting ready to describe is editing a show beginning to end, but instead of when you make a cut, you bring everything forward, you make a cut and bring everything back. And at the end of it, you'll have a bunch of silence at the beginning of the track, which you can easily fix. But this is what he's getting ready to talk about. It's hard to explain, but hopefully that helps.
So instead of pulling things from the left, you pull them from the right. Don't worry about what I just said. What I'm saying to you is you need to have experience in editing to be able to do something like this properly, because you kind of have to learn the basics first, I think, before you can try and do something like this. It is more complicated to edit this way because you have to be very careful about not getting your files out of sync and then your time codes don't match up anymore, right? So
That's right.
You have to be very
Pass, Stephen.
particular with it. But once you've got some experience, like this is something that you can make work for you. And I find this to be this kind of is it's not, I wouldn't say it's in the middle in output of no editing and really fine grain editing. But I think it's like in time, it's about halfway through in time, but you get a much better end result from it, I think.
I really struggle to edit this way because I find it difficult to take notes when I'm recording. I just can't quite multitask that well. And for me, at least, when I've tried it, I have missed things. And so it doesn't quite work for me the way it works for you. We're different people, is what I'm saying.
Well, this is a very different thing. I don't.
So I'm going to get rid of my last comment because it's not really pertinent to this. It worked for me the way it works for you.
This is a very different thing. I don't know if many other people do this. I just developed it over time, but it took me years to be able to get to the point where I felt like I was confident.
All right, so see this? It's a gap. That's probably mouth noise right there. So we're going to go ahead and preemptively cut it. I'm just assuming that the cursor is showing up in this video. I guess we'll find out.
Doing it, and then it took me a lot of practice to be able to do this effectively. It isn't something that I've always been able to do. The last kind of version of this is the like fine detail edit, where this is very time consuming. You will get the best result out.
So this is like a little false start. Restart our sentence and start it again. Get rid of that.
Edit. This is very time consuming. You will get the best result out of it and you'll learn the most. This is you are listening back to the show and you're fixing things as you go, right? Like you start and you go, oh, fix that. This is where you're going to do the most editing for sure. Like even if I'm trying to just be light when I'm doing this, I can't help myself, right? Because you're hearing every little problem. That is when like the really kind of fine detail problem. That is when like the really kind of fine detail edit. I said last, but
so get rid of that restart.
Fine detail edit. I said last, but I said there were 3 because the third one is you pay someone.
That's not
so the first
you editing. It's someone else editing.
Exactly. The first 2 is you doing it, but
so I'm gonna leave that crosstalk in because I think it's kind of funny. Not
so the first
you editing. It's someone else editing.
Exactly. The first two is you doing it, but there is
It's not
the first
you
two
editing. It's someone else editing.
Exactly. The first two is you doing it, but there is another option, and there's another option that me and you both take advantage of, is paying somebody. Obviously, there's a cost to do it, or it maybe not. That wants to get better at it, and you give it to them. I would recommend making it a business arrangement,
Yes.
working with somebody who has some skill, and also then you're paying somebody for their work, their art, and time. It is an option that is becoming more for their work, their art, and time. It is an option that is becoming more and more feasible over time because there are more people that want to make a living from this, so you can get a pretty decent deal. It's an option. It's an option. It will depend on your own.
So I don't think I can get this out cleanly, so I'm going to leave it.
Set of circumstances as to whether that's something you're going to want to do, but I just mention it because it's something that both me and Stephen take advantage of.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's fantastic when you can work with somebody who you really trust. We'll talk more about that in a minute.
Yep. That's the end of my kind of
Okay.
My thing. Kind of
Okay.
my thing.
No, that's good. I generally edit in what you call the fine detail. In fact, if you're watching this on video, that's what you've been seeing me do. Like you are. There are some exceptions to that, so, and we'll get into that. I sort of use a little bit of a mixed method where it is fine detail, but if someone goes off on a rant, I basically leave that intact unless
You see, that's the difference between
that I need to get rid of.
You see, that's the difference between me and you. Like, if I'm sitting down and I'm going to listen, I'm listening to every single thing. I'm not saying that one of us is right, one of us is wrong, but that every single thing. I'm not saying that one of us is right, one of us is wrong, but that's just a big difference. So, like, for example, if I wasn't able to do the note-taking edit, that's how I would edit Upgrade, is the way that you're talking about here. But because
You get where you can see ums and ahs. You kind of know what they look like.
it notes as I go, I do it that way.
We definitely agree on the simple thing is when you're starting out, keep your editing simple, keep it light, unless the format of your show really demands it. I think that's the one place that we agree.
Yeah.
Because you can spend so much time in the edit suite doing things that you never actually publish the show. And
Yep.
if you've so and is a word that I use as a filler word. We mentioned Mike uses like, I use and. So I want to pull that out. Never actually published the show.
Yep.
If you've spent time on your recording and you're published the show.
Yep.
If you've spent time on your recording and your micro on your recording time on your record. Let's see if I can get this out. Recording. I may not be able to. Time on your recording and your microphone technique. Doesn't sound great, but I like it better than the stutter technique and all of that stuff. Then you'll have less egregious things to deal with in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like listen to it and edit it as you go. It's like listen to it and edit it as you go, but don't listen to.
One thing with filler words, especially at the beginning of the sentence, like I said, they make you seem less confident in what you're saying, so I like getting rid of them. First place. Things to deal with in the first place. Oh, I lost my headphones. I'm using this weird headphone extension, and it doesn't really like my in-ear monitors.
Listen to it and edit it as you go, but don't try and make it meticulously perfect. They're kind of like the two things we would recommend that you do when you're starting. Listen to it so you know how the show sounds, you know how to make it better because you've become a listener of the show. but don't spend hours and hours and hours and hours trying to make it the most perfect thing that it can be, because unless you for some reason really love that, which you might, it might be your thing, and if it is, go for it, it's going to end up becoming a chore for you, which is not fun. Should we get to some questions from listeners?
Sounds good to me.
Josh asks, how do you handle syncing up host tracks? My co-hosts and I have been doing sync pops and checking them against a mixed down recording of our call. It works well, but our backgrounds are all in video editing, so that's just how we're used to it. I'm wondering if there's a more efficient way to do it.
That's a pretty efficient way to do it. So what?
That's the way to do it.
Pretty efficient way to do it. All right, so Mike interrupted me. I'm going to pull it up. That's a pretty efficient way to do it.
That's the way to do it, from my experience.
So what Josh is talking about is you either count in and hit record all at once, or you have a 3, 2, 1 clap or something. Thank you. Or something
No
to
problem.
mark that everyone is recording at the same time. And then you take the mixed down recording of the call. So if you're using something like Ecamm call recorder, you have in Logic or whatever you're editing, you have Mike's track, my track, and then the Skype call track. And I can line. So if I was editing this way, call recorder I'd have at the bottom, and it has both Mike and I on the same track, and I can use it to either visually line things up because you see the sound waves, or actually line things up with my ear. I'm at the point where I don't need that, but it's a great way to get started. Line them up. That's the best way for most people to do it. I generally don't rely on the Skype call, if hardly ever, but if you count in and I'll hit record at once, it's all going to be pretty close. Now, the danger in this, I had the worst drift problems on Connect. I don't know why, but it's where the files were in sync. I'm just going to tighten up my sentence with Federico, and I don't know why, but it's where the files were in sync at the beginning, but like to me, but just because something is in sync at the beginning, you need to make sure that you are forth rapidly, because if they're out of sync even by a little bit, it's going to. So now I'm sort of transitioning to more how I would normally edit this. Connected gets pretty much a full listen, but this and some other things, I kind of just look for areas where I know there are going to be problems. By a little bit, it'll speed this up a little bit. It's going to mangle the conversation.
And in my
one question we had for Backstage, and we didn't answer it on the show, is do you edit faster than real time? Because in Logic and a bunch of other editors, you can set playback to 1.5 or 2x or whatever. I can't listen to podcasts that fast, and I can't edit podcasts that fast. My brain just can't do it.
In my opinion, the best way to make sure that this is the case is to have a sync track, like a Skype track, that you're cutting waveforms in the edit suite and make sure it's correct. I don't think you do that, do you? No,
sorry.
I think that's
sorry,
wild.
I was drinking water. Hang on. Hang on. Okay, so here I was caught off guard. I was getting a drink of water, and Mike basically threw to me sooner than I thought he would. And so here I'm going to show you how I mark things while I record, and then we'll clean it up.
Make sure it's correct. I don't think you do that, do you?
See, that was the water bottle.
No,
sorry.
I think that's
sorry,
wild.
I was drinking water. Hang on. Hang on.
No, it's okay. This is one of the things where we fundamentally disagree. Well, I can't believe that Steven edits without a sync track.
Okay, you hear those clicks? Let me put my track in solo. So I do that while I'm recording for things that I want to notice, either that I say or someone else say. I do it real off mic, so I don't do it here next to my microphone. I do it way off mic, but in Logic it shows up, just as vertical lines, and so I use those as markers. So if I was not doing a full listen, I would know, okay, there's a couple of clicks here. I need to really pay attention to what's going on around this area.
I don't think you do that, do you? No, and
Sorry,
I think that's
sorry. I was
wild.
drinking
So
water. Hang on. Hang on.
No, it's okay. This is one of the things where we fundamentally disagree. Well,
Hang on.
No, it's okay. This is one of.
So I want to act like Mike just keeps talking. So let's see if I can do that.
Okay.
So this is the beginning of the word this.
It's okay. This is one of the.
Okay, so I'm going to get rid of all my stuff.
In the edit suite and make sure it's correct. I don't think you do that.
Okay, so now basically he never asked me the question and he talks like he knows the answer to the question that most people never hear him ask.
Waveforms in the edit suite and make sure it's correct. No, it's okay. This is one. Edit suite and make sure it's correct. This is one of the things where we fundamentally disagree. Well, I can't believe that Steven edits without a sync track there constantly, and he feels like I'm wild to need that. So
Yeah, we're different people.
Clemens asks, what is an appropriate noise level in decibels or such as a noise gate use, and which settings?
Oh, I have so many things to say about this.
Yeah,
First of all, all right, so I'm going to leave Mike's interjection. First of all, First of all, never apply plugins during the recording session, because if something goes wrong or you want to change it, too late. You've already laid down the file. So if you use audio in it, recording, you can't do anything about it later. So it's in capital letters in our Google Doc.
There's no reason.
Don't do it.
I cannot think of any reason why you would need to do
Don't
this.
do it.
Like, why would you need to do this? I don't get it.
Don't do it.
Like, why would you ever need to put a compressor to the recorded audio?
See here, we have another vertical line. So that's another marker for me. I probably restarted something.
Audio when it's so easy to do it afterwards.
That's right.
I don't know why people do this.
That's right. And if you're listening to mention things like noise compressor or EQ, those are three basic ways to manipulate. Those are three basic ways to mention things like noise gate, compressor, or EQ. Those are compressor or EQ. Compressor or EQ. Those are three basic ways to manipulate audio. Noise gate listens for quiet noise in the background. Often you have to sample it. And something I use Audition for this, but you sample it and then it listens for that. So I'm getting ready to get this explanation wrong for the record. Across the file and just removes it. A noise gate is fine, but if it's too aggressive, everyone sounds like they're recording in a bathtub. Like it can take out a bunch of the richness of the sound.
I think that's the difference. There's a slight difference.
So Mike's going to correct me. We didn't go back and re-record this, I don't think, so I'm just going to leave all this in.
Noise gate and noise reduction, because you've mentioned like both of them now, right? Like noise reduction is where you're removing it. Noise gate is when it's clear. It's basically reducing the audio on anything up to a certain decibel level.
Yes, you've corrected me. What if I just go back and redo it? Let's go back and redo it.
Or you could just make it sound like I'm the smart one for once.
Okay,
we'll
do that. So I describe noise reduction.
Smart one for once.
Okay,
it's up to you.
We'll do
really.
that. So I describe noise reduction. A noise gate, like Mike said, is a level where any sound beneath that volume level is cut. All right, so let me show you an example of this. So I'm going to go to my track, and I'm going to add a noise gate, which I always forget where things are in Logic. We'll just have to find it. This is where everyone watching the video is like, no, it's right there, Goofus. Noise gate. Okay. So this is the default noise gate. I describe noise reduction. A noise gate like if I move this threshold like way up, Mike said, is a level where any sound beneath. See how it's chopping it out? It's what I'm telling this is anything below minus 3 dB, reduce it 100.
Really?
Okay.
Uh-huh.
A level
So that's like a worst case scenario for a noise gate.
beneath
You've really got to fine tune them. I really try not to use them.
that volume level is cut.
Mm-hmm.
The danger with the noise gate is if someone sort of trails off a sentence like this and they fall below the noise gate, it's going to cut them.
See, let's hear that now. So we'll move this back to 40.
With the noise gate is if someone sort of trails off a sentence like this.
Okay, so it survived that. Let's try minus 25.
If someone sort of trails off a sentence like this.
Still okay.
Someone trails off a sentence like this.
See? Obviously, this is extreme. You would never run a noise gate this high.
Trails off like this. And they
But that's what it does.
fall below the noise gate, it's going to cut them. And
also a noise gate with
it's going to cut them.
also a noise gate with noise gates and noise reduction, they are always last resorts. Like, you should only ever use these things if there was nothing you could do beforehand to stop there being background noise. Is when you do this, you end up with one of two situations. You do a noise reduction on it, which is where you're running it against a sample, and you are left with audio that doesn't sound as good because an amount of clarity has been taken out of the audio. It doesn't matter what you do or what app you use. I can always hear it when I end up.
So the reason I pause play after I make an edit is Logic doesn't play the edit. It's like the playhead doesn't know about it until you pause it and then hit play again.
Of a process file. And a noise gate, it's only removing the noise when is not talking. When they start talking again, if they've got like an air conditioner in the background, you can hear the air conditioner, and then when they stop talking, cuts and you don't hear it anymore. So like even in editing, these things are not ideal. These things should only be used when you don't have another option. You shouldn't record thinking, oh, I'll just remove the noise of that fan afterwards. No, turn the fan off before you start recording.
Tell your
That's
guest.
My advice.
Tell
to
your
you.
guest to turn the fan off.
Because you will always end up with worse.
Tell your guest to turn the fan off.
Because you will always end up with worse sounding audio if you're doing one of these things.
That's right.
But we're still anyway. To get back to this question, so that was part one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Also, compressors are where you increase the volume, right? Is that right? And you can do a bunch of weird stuff with compressors. I've never understood compressors.
So a compressor
honestly.
does two things. So a compressor does two things. It brings up the volume of the quiet parts of the track and brings down.
So part of this we did in our normalization and volume matching, where anything in the quiet part of the track is brought up. A compressor, the way that I edit, is really just fine-tuning that. I could probably get away actually without normalizing in Audition and just using Logic's compressor, but the combination I have found gives me really consistent volume. Even if someone trails off, you can still hear that. It's not artificially bringing their volume up, but it helps everything be a little more even.
Or compresses the louder parts of the track. And so it's compressing the dynamic range of volume on the track. So if someone
I said the twice, I'm gonna get rid of that.
sing the dynamic range of volume on the track. So if someone talks really loud, but then they also talk really quietly, a compressor can help even that out. It's not, if someone talks.
Okay, so let me show you this. So we'll pull up my compressor. I'm gonna turn it off.
Track. So if someone talks really loud, but then they also talk really quietly,
It's gonna be subtle, but listen to this.
on the track. So if someone talks really loud, but then they also talk really quietly,
Okay, then I turn the compressor on.
on the track. So if someone talks really loud, but then they also talk really quietly,
Do you hear the difference? With the compressor on, that volume sounds more consistent. Well, I'll do it one more time. This is off.
volume on the track. So if someone talks really loud, but then they also talk really quietly, a compressor can help even that out. Volume
And on.
the track. So if someone talks really loud, but then they also talk really quietly, a compressor can help even that out.
It's subtle, but it's there.
Again, it's not a cure-all, but it can be a useful tool. And there's lots of settings. The reason I started using Logic is that I actually really like the way Logic's default compressor works, and I tweak very little from that. That's just my personal taste. Right. You hear Logic's compressor.
Some people out there listening to this freaking out that I don't fine-tune a compressor or I don't run an EQ on most people, but it's the way I do it.
On almost everything that I edit, because I basically use it out of the box with very few tweaks. And the EQ.
And then EQ is just change.
Few tweaks.
And then EQ is just changing the sound profile, so you're making it something more bassy or whatever.
Yes, or in Federico's case, less bassy.
Yeah.
I take it.
Okay, so let's play with this. So I'm going to go back to this longer clip of me, and I'm going to add a compressor. Sorry, not a compressor, EQ. Turn that off. EQ, channel EQ. So this is the default. There's no changes. I'll sound the way I did with no EQ.
The dynamic.
But let's say I want less bass. I can start bringing these down. I can make all these adjustments, and now listen to me.
Range of volume.
See, I could bring. The other hand, I could bring this way up
On the track. So if
and maybe I bring down the high end.
someone talks really loud, but then they also talk.
Obviously, that is extreme, right? This is not an EQ that I'd recommend running, but it does give a good example. And you have a bunch of these these pre-done EQs. So like you have like megaphone. Talk really quietly. A compressor can help even that out. Gonna turn that off.
Again, it's not a cure-all. But it can, yes, or in Federico's case, less bassy.
Yeah.
I take a little low end out of Federico.
I'm sure he's not happy about that.
Well,
you know?
he'll be fine.
I just want to say, I'm just going to say it now. I think it's going to come up later on. Things on any of the podcasts. He's not happy about that.
Well,
know?
he'll be fine.
I just want to say, I'm just going to say it now. I think it's going to come up later on. I do not use a compressor or any EQ settings on any of the podcasts I record. So if you listen to my shows and you think they sound good, there you go. Make sure you have decent microphone equipment. Mm-hmm. That is the best thing I can tell you.
Yes.
I do nothing. I do absolutely nothing else.
I don't need two agreements.
Nobody complains. I have not had a complaint about the audio of my shows in I don't even know how many years. But I don't do anything. I only do one thing, which is the thing you're about to explain.
Yes, is volume matching. So this was the question, what's the appropriate noise level to record or process at? I have found it very difficult over my career to have a consistent recording level from people, because people all use different microphones, different equipment. Some people are naturally louder than others. During our recording episode, you can go back and listen to that. We talked about things like peaking. You don't want to max it out. So I'd rather have a track that's a little too quiet than too hot, because it's harder to fix that. This is one of those things, like everything else we're talking about, that there's a bunch of different thoughts and a bunch of different answers out there. What we settled on was matching volume at about minus.
This is where my lack of formal training comes into play.
16. And so this is all very, like, it's so complicated to understand, let alone explain. And I don't understand it well enough to explain it well.
We just found these online and they work great.
But they work great. So we use Audition to do this. Audition does a really good job at.
You've seen me do this at the beginning?
And basically luffs.
Luff balloon.
Ooh, little ASMR for you.
Luffs.
Luff balloons.
Luff balloons.
Mm-hmm.
Luffalators. Minus 16 luffalators. And what this is looking at is basically the volume level of a track, but it's based on how loud it actually sounds. So like there's a lot of weirdness in audio about, I'm going to bring this down minus 2B or minus 4 dB or whatever, but to the human ear, it sounds half as quiet. Because the way the human ear works and the way Logic works are different. So anyways, we matched to -16. There's some other settings in here that Audition has. Again, every article I've read online has different suggestions. Some people think our shows are a little too quiet. I've never thought that, so I've never changed this. But
No one's ever said that to me.
but for instance, remember Subnet, the show, the daily tech show I did for like a year?
Rest in peace.
That was at -12 because -16 was too quiet on the echo. And it turns out that Amazon has a requirement that you're at -12, which is way louder than what we normally do.
Welcome to Subnet.
Yeah, super loud.
Welcome to Subnet.
Super loud out of
Oh
context.
man, we should play the Subnet sounds real quick. Let's see, Logic, assets, Subnet intro, Subnet divider. Oh man, that takes me back.
It made me uncomfortable to edit it. I finally kind of got used to it, but it was very strange.
What was that noise?
Super loud. Super. Finally kind of got used to it, but
Honk.
it was very strange. But as you'll see in the video, I do this in Audition and then go chop up the show in Logic because I don't like editing in Audition.
Some people love Audition. Some people edit in GarageBand. Some people edit in Audacity. There's lots of options. Don't feel like just because we use Logic that you have to.
Personal taste. Okay. Dr. Wilco asks, what is the
That's a good username.
ratio of recorded audio to editing time? I dropped something. Dr. Wilco asks, what? Okay.
Just gonna fix that. I was playing with like this plastic clothespin thing I had on my desk for some reason.
Dr. Wilco asks, what is the ratio of recorded audio to editing time? What factors change that for better or for worse? How much have you been able to streamline it over the years?
So I'll give like my two kind of, I edit more than just Upgrade and Cortex, but they're my best examples. I don't really edit that much more than those anymore. So when I'm doing my note-taking edits, it's for Upgrade, which is the most complex of those. It's about half the time of the recording. So if we record for 2 hours, it would take me maybe an hour to an hour and a half, dependent sometimes. But it's like kind of like 0.5 to 0.75 of the time. Cortex is 3 hours to every hour at least.
Wow.
At least. Sometimes it's more.
Those Cortex boys are nuts.
And just to provide some detail on that, is that because you're going through and cutting things that you wouldn't cut out of other shows? Like, why the additional time?
Because it's so much heavier. Like, I'm editing for content and editing for quality, which I don't do in such large strokes for any other show. And like, we're talking thousands of cuts in Logic, right? Is what I'm doing here. I'm like stitching sentences together, stitching words together. It is really, really, really intense of an edit. But that's just what I've done for the show. It takes about 3 hours to every hour, at least, to edit the show.
For me, Connected is it's definitely slower than real time. It's maybe 1.5 hours for every hour, maybe not quite that much. But again, I do a full listen. There are times on Connected where if someone goes off on a...
So one thing about this, one thing that can affect the time it takes to edit is how close to recording time you edit. So Connected, I literally start editing as soon as the boys send me their Dropbox files. This Backstage episode we recorded almost a week ago. And so this isn't as fresh in my mind as Connected normally is. And that can help speed things up.
Tear about something, I will leave that intact except ums and ahs and pauses that I want to get rid of. I very rarely have to do the thing that you mentioned of stitching sentences or words together on Connected, although it does happen sometimes. Connected also has the additional work that it's 3 people. And when you have just two people, things go faster because it's less to listen to and line up. And if you have timing issues, it's way simpler with just two people. And crosstalk. So when someone interrupts somebody, or what happens a lot is they start their sentence while the other person is ending their sentence. And on Connected, I almost always pull those apart when I can. Sometimes it's not possible because, for instance, I'm going to pick on you a little bit. You do this a lot to Federico, where Federico
Leave Mike's little Kermit the Frog in there.
Where Federico will be talking and then you sort of pick up, and Federico does a thing where he'll just end his sentence a word early, and I can't manufacture a word. So I've got to leave the overlap in a little bit.
See, look, as we're talking about it, he does it to me.
So I've got to leave the overlap in a little bit.
I've developed bad habits for certain people, and that...
Pull that apart.
So I've got to leave the overlap in a little bit.
Yeah, I've developed bad habits for certain people, and that, it's just what happens in conversation over time, and I know I have that habit with Federico.
Yeah, so I try to do what I can with those. The other shows, Ungeniused is definitely slower than Real Time. If you've listened to Ungeniused, we've talked about it here. It's scripted, it's edited, basically like Cortex is, but thank God it's an 8-minute show and not a 2-hour show. But there's...
So what I meant by that was Ungenius is edited like Cortex. Cortex is not scripted like Ungenius is. So my sentence was a little confusing there.
Basically like Cortex is, but thank God it's... If you've listened to Ungeniused, we've talked about it here. It's scripted, it's edited, basically like Cortex is, but thank God it's an 8-minute show and not a 2-hour show. But there's no ums or I very often stitch words together on Ungeniused because we'll redo a take and the first half of the word and the first take and the second half of the word and the second take is better, and I put them together. So Ungeniused, for an 8-minute show, it may take me 45 minutes to edit. So the ratio is about the same, but it's just a much smaller sample size, thank goodness. And then Liftoff and Flashback are kind of in the middle. I'm basically just assembling it and taking out anything super egregious.
Molly's asks, what is the worst editing mistake that you've ever made?
One time on Connected early on when I took over...
So I'm going to get rid of my little thinking noise.
Mistake that you've ever made?
One time on Connected early on when I took over the edit from you, I had the issue of drift and I didn't catch it. And so Federico answered a question before he was asked it. And I got a bunch of tweets about that, and I had to go in and fix it and re-release it.
Yeah, I remember that was
he's a wizard.
The transition was a little rocky.
Yeah.
That was difficult for you. I know that, and I will always appreciate that you took it away because Connected is a hard edit. It is because it's 3 people. Adding extra people in.
Yeah, it's the hardest edit I do each week, and definitely the most time-consuming I do.
Exponentially increases the amount of work. It's not 1-to-1. It really isn't. And so. I can't think of something that was like particular that stands out. Like I've made all of the errors that anybody's ever made. Like that one, I know I've misaligned people. I've cut things poorly, left things in I was supposed to cut out. But like nothing like, wow, I can't believe I did that. There was once I kind of count this in the edit. Like I read the ads in Cortex afterwards. So I could kind of consider them as part of the edit. And one time I read a sponsor and then halfway through started calling the sponsor by another sponsor's name.
I remember that.
which was very fun. And everyone was cool with it, but it was very embarrassing.
That was fun.
No, it wasn't. Matt asks, what is it like to work with a dedicated editor rather than editing your own show? What goes into the decision to go that route versus editing it yourself?
I only have one example of this. So Jim Metzendorf edits a lot of stuff on Relay and elsewhere. He's absolutely fantastic. He took over Mac Power Users from me. So when I joined MPU 2 years ago, it was being edited by somebody else, not Jim. And I wanted to take over the edit when I joined the show. So to really get a feel of the show. The best way to understand what
So I don't need the word so there. Bring that up a bit.
Edit when I joined the show. to really get a feel of the show. The best way to understand what a podcast is to edit it, not being on it, editing it. And so I edited MPU for almost a year, I think almost exactly a year. And it got to a point for me where I felt comfortable with where the show was and my place in the show, because it's very hard coming into a pre-existing show. Joining MPU is one of the hardest things I've ever done in my career. Like joining a show that's got 10 years of history, very, very difficult. And so for me, it was the show with me and David on is up and running, and I'm comfortable with how it's going. And it was really a time issue where I was really getting to a point because of other projects that editing MPU was just too much of a task for me. And MPU, if you listen, has a lot of guests, which really makes the editing work take longer, because unlike Connected, where I know what I'm going to get from you and Federico every week as far as audio quality, guests are all over the map. And so you're kind of rebuilding the whole thing every week.
Yeah.
And so it was time. And honestly, Jim is a fantastic editor and is better equipped to deal with those guest issues than I ever was. And so for me, it was an upgrade for MPU for Jim to take it over.
Yeah, like there are times when, so we say, I edit the Pen Addict, but
for Jim to take it over.
Yeah, like there are times when, so we say, I edit the Pen Addict, but the Pen Addict's really, so we say, I edit the Pen record for an hour, I'm done with it in like 20 minutes. But if we have sometimes I'll just give it to Jim, because we have a lot of guests on the Pen Addict that don't have podcast gear, so they're just using whatever they can get their hands on. And so I will typically just say, hey, Jim, can you do this one for me? Because he is way better at making subpar audio sound good than I am. But for me, most of my shows are not edited by me anymore. So Jim edits analog, remaster, and the test drivers. You Connected and Ingenious, and Dan Provost edits Thoroughly Considered. And for me, it's because if I had to edit those shows, I wouldn't be able to do them anymore. This is the time thing. Mm-hmm. I unfortunately don't have the time. And also, I get RSI pains, and I physically could not edit that amount of shows anymore. I used to do all of them, but I don't anymore. I used to do all of them, but I don't anymore. And it really, to find someone with Jim's Relay FM that even knows, you got to leave it in somebody's hands. You know, like Jim gives me back a file, and I have to just hope that he got it right.
So this question and answer section is easier to edit because basically one of us asks the question and the other answers it, and it's not so much back and forth. So there's less opportunity for crosstalk.
I don't want to listen to the whole thing. Mm-hmm. So, like sometimes I'll do that, but most of the time I am not able to do that. So I have to trust that he's done it. And, that's a long-term thing, and you build that trust with people over time.
That's right.
Ben asks, what is your least favorite part of editing a podcast, and what do you do to make it more enjoyable and less of a chore, if it ever is a chore?
It can be a chore. For me, it's especially with Connected, it's just the hours-long single task ahead of me. Mm-hmm. So we record Connected. I'll use Central Time. We record at 12 on Wednesdays. We're generally off the call by 2 or 2:30, and the show's generally up by 5 or 5:30. And so it is a whole work day to do Connected. And for me, it not only limits what else I can get done on Wednesdays, but it's also, I don't know, maybe I got something going on, but I find it can be difficult to really stay on that one task for hours at a time. Generally, the way that I work is bouncing around between different things. Surprised how many times I try to go to music and like play music while I'm editing a podcast. Like, wait, dummy, you can't do that.
Wrong with you?
I don't know. Something's wrong in my brain.
Just play it really quietly, I guess.
It'd be very confusing. But for me, to make it more enjoyable and why I continue to do it is that I get to help craft the show. And on Connected, over time, I've made the edit more and more of a character. So if you listen to Connected, you'll hear on a pretty regular basis jokes or Easter eggs or sound effects. I drop things in from time to time to make the show more fun, and I love being able to do that when it's possible.
And that is editor's choice.
That's right.
That's what we call that. Editor wins. Editor always wins because they're putting the time in.
There's a question further down that asks about that of, what happened.
Let's find that one.
Huh?
When I want to find that question because we may as well just.
There's a question further down that asks about that.
So this time I'm going to make Mike interrupt me.
Asks about that.
When I want to find that question because we may as well just answer that now.
Yes.
Can't find it. Why can't I find this question? I know it's in here somewhere.
I don't know. There was a question. I'm sorry if we don't know where it went. It was in here. I don't know what happened. Oh, here it is by Alex.
Great.
How do you handle cutting content when hosts disagree about whether it's worth including in the show? I assume I have full control. And
the editor has the final say.
That's right.
Just going to clean that up a little bit. And I got a little pop right there I'm going to get rid of.
I assume I have full control.
The editor has the final say.
That's right. Now, I'm not a dictator, and so there are times where, because we're talking about connected, where you or Federico are like, hey, I'd like to cut that. Yeah, absolutely, I'll do that because you want it gone. But there's also times where I cut things, but I don't ask permission. And so I've cut whole conversations or rabbit holes or rearranged things, and I feel like I
remember when I said I use and as a holder word?
Arrange things, and I feel like I know that y'all trust me with that. And if it was something big, I'd go and ask. But at the end of the day, I feel like it's up to me to make that sort of final decision.
I'm not putting the time in. If I want to tell you how to edit the show, I'll take the edit back.
Right. Which means you do say, hey, that should be cut, then that
edit back.
Right. Which means when you do say
edit back.
Which means when you do say, hey, that should be cut, then that I know that you really mean that.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to listen to that.
Sometimes Stephen makes jokes that need to be cut, and I have to tell him.
It's not always that.
See what this laugh is about.
That.
It is quite a bit of the time. The only time I ever say you should cut that is like, you can't keep that joke in. What else?
That makes me sound like a bad person.
What have we got
it's not true.
here?
I know that you...
Tony... Oh, go on.
I'll say, we're running at 40 minutes now.
Okay, so now Mike and I are just talking, so obviously all this section will be cut.
What else have we got here?
I know that you...
Tony... Oh, go on.
I'll say, we're running at 40 minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry.
Everyone knows how rough this is before we fix it all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but this is good. This is for people.
That's people right. We're not making this worse than normal for people.
No, make it. See how you'd hate us to be doing this right now.
So, Mike, I know with Cortex, you and Gray both.
Okay, so all that can go away. This little mouth noise can go away, and I'll pull this up, and you won't ever know that Mike and I were debating how long the show should go.
What else have we got here?
So, Mike, I know with Cortex...
Quite a bit of the time. The only time I ever say you should cut that is like, you can't keep that joke in. You can't keep that joke in.
So, Mike, I know with Cortex, you and Gray both take a turn at the editing. We had a couple questions about that. Patrick asked, what program do you recommend for editing when you have more than one person editing an episode? And... Chemical Sora asks, what are some recommendations on a workflow for that?
All right, so my first recommendation is don't do it.
Yeah, don't do it.
Don't do this.
Recommendation is don't do it.
Yeah, don't do it.
Don't do it. Just don't do it. It adds so much complexity and uncertainty into the process.
I think...
Because unless you're... Go on.
As someone who doesn't do this, from my perspective, it would be like...
into the process.
As someone who doesn't do this, from my perspective, it would be like if I want someone else to have input on the edit, maybe I do an edit and then they listen to it and make recommendations.
Yeah.
but the cutting is up to me. But that's not what you and Gray are doing, right?
No, so I do an edit and then I give it the entire Logic project to Gray. We use Dropbox for this. It syncs the entire project.
That scares me.
Yeah, well, we have a system box for this.
Tidy this up a little bit.
It syncs the entire project.
That scares me.
Yeah, well, we have a system in place, right? That we work with. So like, I do my edit, close Logic, confirm the file size, edit, close Logic, confirm the file size, send that file size to Gray, and I will now not open that Logic project.
He explained all this. It still makes me nervous to think about.
Until he's done. And when he's done, he duplicates the project and renames it. So, like, that is how we do it, because if... renames it. That is how we do it, because if we open that at the same time, everything can explode. Because none of these tools are built to do this, right? Like,
A lot of audio editors have a couple of options. You could import the audio into the Logic project itself, or you could leave them in Finder. So that's something to think about when you are talking about multi-person editing, but yeah, just don't do it.
like, it's not for that, right? You have to there is no like multiple people editing this. It's kind of like you have to completely stop and then give it to the other person, right? As if they're just opening it fresh. The reason me and Gray do this is like, it's the thing that we...
See, Mike said like there, but I don't think I could extract that one.
As if they're just opening it fresh. The reason me and Gray do this is like, it's the thing that we started out doing and now we just always do. And it's initially like we were entering into this creative partnership and I didn't edit a show to the level that Gray was editing. This creative partnership, and I didn't edit a show to the level that Gray was editing with his other shows. So
almost done.
I wanted him to have a final say on the edit to make sure I cleared it up right. And then over time, that has now just developed into there are two people to make sure that this show is the best that it can be. And over a certain period of time, if everything's going well, like if it ain't broken, why fix it, right? So that is just our process. We have been running the show for this long now. We don't introduce errors this way. You know, we both have our own checks and balances to make sure it's all good. But I don't recommend this. Like, you should do what Steven's done. If multiple people want to have input, there's one editor and everybody else can just add their own input. Like, you send a mixed down file for them, they listen to it, and they're like, oh, at 20 minutes, this thing happened, you should change it.
Right.
Like, you shouldn't have multiple people going in there because you've got to, not going in there because not everybody's going to be at the same technical level. Like,
Nope. Get rid of these. Get rid of this.
all people going in there because not everybody's going to be at the same.
Cross those a little bit.
All people going in there because not everybody's going to be at the same technical level. Don't tell him, but I'm a better editor than Gray now. Right? So don't tell him, but I'm a better editor than Gray now. Don't tell him, but I'm a better. Don't tell him. Don't tell him, but I'm a better editor than Gray now. Right? So when he gives me the file back, I'll tweak some of the.
Okay, so one thing I want to do is I want to put a laugh in here. And I have one from earlier somewhere. If I can find it, I'll do it. Let's make this quick.
You should cut quite a bit of the time. The only time.
So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to come back down to where we were.
He's going to be at the same technical level. Don't tell him, but I'm a better editor than Gray now. Gray now. Right? So when he
Yeah, that makes it sound richer.
Tell him, but I'm a better editor than Gray now. right? So when he gives me the file back, I'll tweak some of the edits that he's made because he edits differently to me. And I've put in thousands of hours now. Like, I'm pretty good at this. And also now at this point, he actually doesn't really edit that much anymore. Gray is mostly just listening, and he now will just pick up things that are wrong. But when we were starting out, he was making as many cuts as I was because I still needed to feel out how the show was supposed to sound. So it was a very specific set of circumstances that led to the way that we edit Cortex. I don't recommend anybody follow our example.
I agree. Don't be like Mike.
Don't. It's not. This is one thing where I just really, really recommend that you don't do it.
Let's finish with this question from Zach. They ask, what considerations do you make when deciding on the style of editing for a show? The Test Drivers and Upgrade are both shows talking about tech, but they feel pretty different in the edit.
Well, I mean, the reason those shows sound different in the edit is because they're edited. Well, I mean, the reason those shows
pretty different in the edit.
The reason those shows sound different in the edit is because they're edited by different people. Right? Jim edits the Test Drivers. But even when I was editing the Test Drivers, which I was at the beginning, it was just a choice. Like, the shows have a different feel. They have a different attitude to them. Like, we have music beds for the ads, like, going in and out of that. It's just, these are just stylistic choices that I feel made sense for those shows. And again, that comes with practice and time and experience is that you kind of get a feel for how you want something to sound and you make different considerations for it that way.
Yeah, I think part of this too is it can change over time, or if a show like Upgrade, where you guys didn't necessarily start with all these structured different segments, but you've done it over time and they all have taken on their own personality. So just because you make a decision on day one doesn't mean it'll be the same decision years in.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Things have changed over time.
Doesn't mean it'll be the same decision years in. Then. Yeah,
definitely. Things have changed over time with all of them. And it changes in every part of it, from the recording to the editing. That's just how a project grows.
All right. We did it.
We did it, maybe. I wouldn't be surprised if we get more questions.
All right. We did it.
We did it, maybe. I wouldn't be surprised if we get more questions. So we have a topic next time, which will be kind of when it comes to file hosting and website options and stuff like that. That is our next big topic. But it would not surprise me if we maybe did a follow-up to editing. So I'll say this, is if you continue to have questions about editing, send them in. Otherwise, send in questions about where and how to host your files, what websites you should be using, stuff like that. You can send those in over Twitter by using #AskBackstage, in the Relay FM members Discord with the !AskBackstage command, or by emailing them to backstage@relay.fm. Don't forget to check out that video that Stephen has put in the show notes.
It's this video.
It's a good companion to this, because you'll also hear what it sounds like to actually make this episode, because you will hear all of the times that we mess up, and that might be of help to you, or maybe you'll just find it entertaining. So until next time, when we ask you to come backstage with us, I'm Mike Hurley, and he's Stephen Hackett. Say goodbye, Stephen.
Bye, y'all.
Should I stop recording now? Yeah.
All right. So I've got all my cuts in. You can see how many cuts there are. Just lots of stuff. And now I'm going to be ready to export it. So you can do this a couple ways. You can select everything and Command B is bounce. I export as wave. Those are the settings that I use. I use offline bounce, which means it's as fast as the computer can do it, not real time, which is 1-to-1. So I'm going to bounce. I'm going to put it in my folder. And when it's doing its thing, I'm going to open Forecast. Forecast is an application by our friend Marco. It takes audio and compresses it to MP3s. If you had chapters, you can manage the chapters in here, all of that good stuff. So this podcast is actually in the Fusion channel or feed, Backstage editing this month. Mike, Stephen. Have our description in here. I would also put this in our content management system before I publish it, but this embeds it into the MP3. So we get our bouncing done. So now in this folder, I've got a wave.
Welcome back to Backstage. What happens in conversation? Wanted. More question. FM. Don't forget to check out that video that Stephen has put in the show notes. It's a good companion to this because you'll also hear when we ask you to come backstage with us. I'm Mike Hurley and he's Stephen Hackett. Say goodbye, Stephen.
Bye, y'all.
All right, and we will import that audio. And I need the correct artwork. So let me grab that. With the black cut out, not the gold one. Oh, I encoded 128K. Some people do 96, which is fine. 128 is kind of where I've settled. So it's going to save this for me. And I'm going to save it as an MP3. And now in my folder, I have...
Welcome back to Backstage,
My file.
where we talk about...
So then I'll upload it and publish it, and I'll put this video up. So thank you all for hanging out with me for an hour and a half. I know that was a long time, but hopefully that was helpful. Like Mike said, if you have questions, hit us up in Discord with the !AskBackstage or hashtag #AskBackstage on Twitter. I think we're probably going to talk about editing again in February. It's really complicated. It's hard to talk about, and everyone has a different idea, and most of the ideas are good. So this is just the way that we do it, but hopefully this was helpful, and please let me know, and see you around.